Hi everybody, hope you are all having a wonderful first few days of spring. Here in upstate New York, the weather can be unpredictable. One day it's 70 degrees, the next day it is cloudy, rainy, and spitting snow. So we find ourselves once again inside the house doing inside projects. And today we're going to tackle the Coleus. Probably about 6 weeks ago, I took Coleus cuttings. They've been soaking in water. They've now got some really good roots, and I'm going to be sticking them in soil, and then I'm going to put them under some grow lights. We're also going to look at my grow light system. I recycle and repurpose things around the house to use for stands for my plants, and I'm going to show you what I use for that. So the first thing we're going to tackle, the Coleus. We're going to start by mixing up some potting soil for our Coleus. Now I just have a run-of-the-mill basic potting mix. I've got it in a tub here. We're going to moisten it up just slightly. And then we're going to mix it up. It's important to pre-moisten your potting mix whenever you're using it, because once it dries out, it is very, very hard to rehydrate. So by keeping it damp, when you do go in and water your plants, it will help the soil stay moist instead of trying to moisten itself if you put it in dry. So once we have it pre-moistened, again, I don't do it really, I don't want it soaking wet. I just want it enough so that when I do water the plants in, that it will hold the moisture. I'm going to add some Osmocote. I have it laying around. I'm not affiliated with Osmocote, but we're just going to put that in so the plants will have some fertilizer when it is time. And finally, we're going to use some pots. I recycle my pots. The Coleus that we are using today is not Proven Winners Coleus, but I have these Proven Winners pots left over from some annuals that I planted last year, so we're just going to use them to pot the Coleus up in. And basically, I think they're going to be the perfect size and depth for our Coleus. We're going to throw our soil in, firm it down to make sure there's no air pockets in there. You don't want to overfill it, but you want to leave a little lip so that when you do water, the water doesn't spill off over the top, but it'll stay in there. And that's basically it. We're just going to I'm just going to fill up a whole bunch of pots so that when it's time to put the Coleus in, it'll be simple and quick. I've got all my pots filled. I have about 30 of them. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a pencil and I'm going to stick it down in the center of each pot, and I'm going to stir it around a little bit. Because the Coleus have long stems and roots on them, I think I can just stick them right down into the center of the pot and then firm them in. But the first step is going to be to make a hole in the center. Now, one thing I do with my Coleus cuttings is I make sure that my soil, when I'm repotting, and the water that I'm going to be putting them on are room temperature. Coleus are super sensitive to the cold, and I found that by using room temperature products, ingredients, or water, they're less likely to suffer from shock. There we go. And I'm going to do all 30 of my containers just like that. Here's some of the Coleus that we rooted in water. And we're just going to take them out of there. You can see we've got some pretty good little roots forming here. Just need to untangle them a little bit. There's some nice roots. They're going to be so much happier once we put them into the soil where they can gather nutrients, because they really don't get much from the plain water. So let's pot them up. Let's work on this one first. Here's our container. Here's our hole down in the center. You see it there? We're just going to take our Coleus, push it gently down in there. You don't want to break off those roots. Tuck those roots down, and then gently firm it in place. And that Coleus is all potted up and ready to grow. Only 30 more to do. Let's get going. These pots are the perfect depth for these. These are doing really well. Can you see all the roots on them? Woo, baby. They're really nice. There's one section all done. To make that hole a little bit wider. Tuck that right down in, firm that soil around. Let's get some more. These obviously didn't root as well as the others, but they still rooted. Still worth a shot. When you consider that each of these Coleus plants will probably cost you maybe $4 or $5 a piece, this can be quite the savings. Another big bunch of roots. This one's pretty. Look at those leaves. The stem on this one is super stiff. Really nice and strong. Pretty leaves on that. Coleus is one of those plants that's super, super easy to root. Another bunch of roots. These have some good roots too. Not quite as nice as the other ones, but now I just noticed that the roots on these are up tall. They're up here and this stem is down here. So I'm going to get a pair of scissors and I'm going to cut that off. So hopefully you can see. The roots are all up here. There's nothing growing here, so I'm just going to snip that off. And this is going to go into the soil. That's interesting. This variety Coleus did that the whole thing. Unfortunately, I don't know the names of these Coleus. How about that? I got the right number. We've got about 30 plants of Coleus all potted up. I'm going to take advantage of my kitchen sink here and I'm going to water them in there. The final little thing that we're going to do to the Coleus is I want to pinch them back at the top because they're growing so tall and leggy. I want them to start to bush out. So I'm going to go in and just pinch off just above a branch of 2 leaves. So there's 2 leaves here. I'm going to pinch the stem right in here. So it looks just like this, and that's going to force it to start branching. And we'll have a nice bushy plant to put out come late spring, early summer. Now that that Coleus is potted up, let's take a look at those homemade plant stands that we're going to put them on. When it comes to choosing a shelving unit for your light setup and your plants, you want to take a couple things into consideration. First of all, safety is first because you're going to be using water and electricity together, and you want to make sure that nobody's going to get zapped or shocked. So first thing I'm going to recommend is that you get an inline ground fault circuit interrupter. That way if water gets into your electricity, this will go off and nobody's going to get hurt. Very, very important. You also want to pick a shelving unit that's not going to be damaged by any potential water that gets on it. So plastic or metal would be much better than wood or particle board. I picked up this plastic unit at Lowe's the other day. It's a stackable kind of like a rubber plastic shelving unit, and I thought it would be perfect for plants. Number one, water's not going to hurt it at all. The other thing is it's just perfectly wide enough to put 2 4-foot grow lights underneath it. I wish it was a little bit wider, but this is going to work just fine. And I just put the grow lights on using zip ties. So that's super easy. It holds 3 trays across here, which is really pretty good. When I start my seeds, I usually start them in a 72 cell, and that's just fine. So when I first start them, I might have 3 trays of 72 here, and they'll grow just fine in that. And then if they're really happy, I might need to bump them up into something larger, in which case I'm going to transplant from the 72 into a 36, actually 2 36 trays. So if I start out with a 72 and I need to bump it up, then I need to make sure I have enough light and room to do 2 36-inch or 36 cell trays there. So a lot of people don't realize that you're going to need more lights than you initially start out with, because some people might start with this and just put a little 2-foot light over it and think they're just fine. But if they need to bump their plants up because they're growing bigger, you're going to need more lights. So I would always recommend you go with a 4-foot or even a 3-foot light rather than a 2-foot. That way, if you need to bump up your 72 cell tray, you've got the space and you have the lights that will accommodate that. Now, when it comes to lights, I'm using LEDs here. The thing about LEDs is they're cheaper to operate, and you can keep them up high because the light shines down nicely and the wavelength is perfect for the plants. If you use fluorescent lights you can probably get much cheaper than LEDs, but you have to keep them about 2 inches above the plants at all time, which means you need to raise and lower, and it can be kind of a headache and a hassle. The fluorescent lights will give off more heat, and they're more expensive to operate, but they're cheaper to buy. The LEDs, you don't have to do the raise and lower thing. They're a little bit more expensive, and they're cheaper to operate. So I'm going to suggest you go with LEDs over fluorescent lights. But any kind of shelving unit is going to work for you. And you can think outside the box. For example, these are just 2 little tables stacked on top of each other. You can see I've got an LED light underneath here. I just used zip ties again to put it in. And there's plenty of room here. That light will shine down on the plants, and that'll be good. This one holds 4 trays. That's what I wish this other one held, was 4. This holds 4 trays beautifully. I could also put LED lights down under the bottom and put some plants and growing trays down there, and it would be just fine. Up here, I could do an LED light in the ceiling. In fact, I have this kind of set up down in my basement. I have an LED light on the ceiling, and then I put my big ferns right on top of this table. So it's easy for me to water. They're getting all that light from the top, and then I can do smaller plants down here and down at the very bottom. So this could work. You know, you don't have to have a true plant or a shelving unit. Just look around and see what you have in your house. Small tables or even big 6 or 8 foot tables could work. As long as they'll stack on each other and you can somehow put the lights underneath, you're fine. And don't forget you need that ground fault circuit interrupter. And finally, you never know what you're going to find in the trash. We found these rolling mail carts many years ago that nobody wanted them. And nobody wanted them because when you put something on the shelf, it's slanted. So nobody could figure out what to do with them. But we took them because if you do some more scrounging and you find some of the wire shelving racks, people usually throw them out so you can find them along the road. You can just set them there. That makes the shelf nice and level. You want to get waterproof trays. I forgot to mention that with the other ones. Always use waterproof trays so that the water can't get down from one level to another. Remember, safety, safety, safety. So you can put your waterproof trays right here. Again, I've got an LED light. I just zip tied that right to the top here. And I can very simply just put plants there, and they're going to get all the light they need. And what's nice is I can put bigger plants here because the shelving is so wide. I can do the same thing down on the bottom, and again, just like I did with the little table display, we're going to put lights up at the top, and I can put some bigger plants up here. So think outside the box. You don't have to have one of those professional growing stations. Look around, see what you have, see what the neighbors are throwing out. You'd be surprised what you can find along the road. But this is basically the setup that I use down in my basement, and my plants grow beautifully down there, waiting for summer to come. I have a few more points that I want to share with you. First of all, how many lights do you need? If your shelf is about 2 feet wide, you're going to need a minimum of 2 lights under here. If it's a foot wide, 1 will probably do just fine. You're going to want to put your lights on a timer, 16 hours on, 8 hours off. Plants do need to sleep just like we do. You also want to get a heat mat. Some seeds like to germinate when things are a little bit warmer, and the heat mat will help with that. And finally, an oscillating fan will help with preventing some diseases and keep the airflow going. Plants really don't like being inside, so the fan will give them some movement and keep the air flowing. That'll keep them a little bit happier. I hope I've given you some ideas, and you can get out there and start growing some plants in your basement. In case you're wondering about any of the products that I mentioned in today's video, here's pictures of them. Now, I'm not affiliated with any of these. You can use whatever you want. I just thought I would share them with you. When it comes to the lights, make sure you find some that are full spectrum. That's what's best for all of the plants. And be sure to watch my Coleus video if you're interested in how we initially took our cuttings. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.